So now we've got compressed air. Some common names for compressed air are HPA, high pressure air, compressed air of course, air, N2, nitrogen, nitro, and you may hear some people call it nitrous or nitrous oxide. That's just wrong. It's completely wrong. It's not NO2, it's not nitrous oxide, which is what they use in race cars. Nitrous is for cars, nitrogen for paintball. All right, so let's keep that straight. So let's talk about the pros of compressed air. As you can see, each one of these tanks has got a regulator on it, and they've got a gauge, a couple little more aspects to it than the CO2. The regulator ensures that no matter what, your pressure coming out is going to be consistent. Now that leads directly into accuracy. If your velocity is the same with each shot, because your pressure is the same, well, your balls are going to go in the same spot. If you get bad paintballs, well, that's another story. But compressed air is going to greatly increase your accuracy because it will increase your consistency. Now, number two, these are really stable. Compressed air doesn't fluctuate greatly with temperature changes, humidity changes. It's going to function pretty much the same on a 110-degree day as it will when there's snow out. So the other thing is you can fill these tanks pretty easily. If it's halfway full, not a problem. Just top it off. You don't need to bleed it all out like you do with the CO2 tanks. It's much like filling a glass of water. You don't need to pour out the rest of your water before you top it off. So it really makes it a lot more convenient. It's much better on your gun. All guns can accept it. It's not hard on your seals. It's just a fantastic system. Some of the downfalls, however, it's just a little bit more expensive. These steel tanks here are in the $50 to $60 range, and these these carbon fiber tanks are about $150. So a lot more expensive than CO2. However, fills usually are the same. Now, with a carbon fiber system, you want to protect that. These are very strong, of course, but the carbon fiber is susceptible to scratches by rocks, sharp objects out in the field. So you generally need to invest in a tank cover. So with a steel tank, you don't. But try and cover all the bases here. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring the camera in. We're going to talk about the 3,000 PSI tanks, 3,000 PSI versus 4,500 PSI, steel versus carbon fiber. So let's get these out of the way and focus in on these guys. All right, let's talk about the physical differences between compressed air and CO2. As you can see, quite a bit bulkier than even a 20-ounce CO2 tank. Now this black regulator up here is of course the regulator. This happens to be the Gorilla Myth regulator. It's one of the smallest on the market. And the purpose of that is to take the super high pressure air inside and regulate it down to a safe pressure. Your paintball gun would burst. It would crack a leak if you let 3,000 PSI into it. So that's why this guy's here puts it down to about 800 PSI. Now, different manufacturers, the regulator length may vary, maybe a little longer. Not really a big deal. They all function approximately the same way. Some may be low pressure output of like 400 PSI for some high-end guns. Some may be adjustable output. Doesn't really matter. The concept is really the same. So what we've got here is our from the burst disc. This is the safety feature. It works just like the one on the CO2 tank. However, it's set to a different pressure. It's a higher pressure. This is your fill valve or fill nipple. This is a one-way valve. The reason that is because unlike CO2 where the pin valve is a two-way valve, you fill it through that valve, goes out to your paintball gun, that's two ways. This regulator is a one-way valve. It's designed to let air through it at a regulated pressure, but it is not designed to have air forced the other way through it. So we have this fill nipple, so you can fill up your tank and then let the air go out your regulator into your gun. Got the gauge here, tells you how much is in your tank. Fill operators can go off this. These are very accurate, and you can check it during the game and be like, oh sweet, I got about 2,000 PSI left, I'm doing fine. As you approach about 1,000 PSI, I'd look to start getting your tank filled back up. Now, these steel tanks, pretty durable. You don't need a tank cover for them. If they get a little, there's paint on the outside. If they get chipped up and that paint starts flaking off, it's not really a big deal unless you really care what your tank looks like. So that's a savings right there. Whereas with a carbon fiber tank, you really want to get a cover, but don't need to for the steel tanks. Now you got to deal with a little bit more weight. This tank is a little bit more than 3 pounds, and this guy is even more. Now the small guy, and that's pretty lightweight, but these are kind of a specialty tank. Those are designed for either players using pump markers, or some people, you tactical guys with your air through stocks. These will fit in nice and snug. So this just doesn't have that much capacity, which is why it's really not that popular. The 48 cubic inch, 3000 psi tank is the most popular steel tank on the market. Now let's take a look at our carbon fiber tanks, and we'll talk about those. So what we've got here are our carbon fiber compressed air tanks. Now these are all manufactured by Gorilla Air. On the middle tanks, you can see the actual carbon fibers being wound around. Now inside each one of these tanks is a metal cylinder that's put there for structure. But the carbon fiber is what kicks down on the weight a huge amount, and what gives it its incredible amount of strength. These are all 4,500 psi tanks. That's a huge amount of pressure. Now, some manufacturers still make fiberglass wrap tanks. They're going to look pretty similar. They may be black graphics, they may be whatever. It doesn't really matter. You don't need to care about that, because if it's rated a 4,500 psi tank, it's a 4,500 psi tank. Carbon fiber and fiberglass both weigh roughly the same. So let's talk about this guy. This is a 48 cubic inch, 4,500 psi tank. It's one of the lightest tanks I've ever seen. Now, if you're paying attention, you notice I said 48 cubic inch. This is also 48 cubic inch. Really? Well, the thing is, the walls on this tank are so much thicker because the steel is not as strong as carbon fiber. That's how you get a much lighter, this thing's like a pound less or more, much lighter and way smaller tank. Of course, this comes at a price, about 50 bucks, about 150 bucks. So I'm going to talk about some maintenance of these, because you want to take care of these guys. You don't want to have any scratches on them. So as I touched earlier, all carbon fiber and fiberglass tanks should be protected with a cover. Something like a neoprene cover. We sell a bunch of them, everyone sells a bunch of them, everyone makes a bunch of them. Choose what you like, not really a big deal. Also, a couple things here you want to protect. The threads here, if you drop this and it gets a ding on it, well, you just toasted your $150 tank, and you either got to repair it or you got to get a new one just because you dropped it. It's kind of lame. So with compressed air tanks and actually CO2 tanks, it'd be good to get a nice little metal screw down cap called a thread protector, and that'll protect it under most cases if you drop it on its valve. Your fill nipple, well, you're pumping air through that every time you fill it up. You don't want to get any sort of dirt or grime or paint in that, because you start pumping air in that and that's going to get that crap inside your tank. You really, really want to be careful about that. So you can get a nice metal or plastic or rubber nipple cover, and we sell those as well. Absolutely key to have those on your compressed air tanks. I don't see any of you guys without it.